Thank you, Cornelia. Saxophone is actually also content in a way, but yeah. So before I start, I'm actually curious to see a little bit of who is in the audience. Who in this audience has something to do with localization? Who has something to do with content creation? Who is doing something entirely different? Well, yeah, okay. Cool, so hopefully there's something in here for all of you. I have three topics. Topic of changes, and of course I try to have a beautiful alliteration here. Chances, which is a different word for opportunities, and some concepts that I have. And I like to always start my presentations by giving you the takeaway up front, so you know what to watch out for in my presentation. I think that the changes that we're seeing in content in general and the way users interact with content have great opportunities for both content creators as well as localization people. I think we need to look a little bit outside of what we normally do, but there's a lot of things that are very adjacent to what we're doing and we're really good at, and there are opportunities coming up. So let me give you a very personal story about the changes, the way we interact with content and the way users interact with content. So I had a private emergency the other day. My coffee machine broke down, right? So what do you do nowadays when your coffee machine broke down? Well, what I did is I said, okay, Google, give me the best coffee machine on the market. I want to buy it, right? That's what you do. Of course, if you own different technology, you say a different word instead of Google, but I'm an Android person, so I said Google. And so what my phone gave me was this. There's apparently a coffee tea club somewhere in the world, and it rated the Melitta coffee machine here, the #1 coffee machine in the world. Is anybody here from Melitta or related? That's good, because this is actually the only good thing I'm going to say about Melitta. So what I actually really liked about that is it has an easy-to-use programmable timer. It's not quite AI yet, so it does not automatically know at what time I wake up and then start, you have to actually set it up the day before, but at least you can set it up the day before. And it says it has a drip-free spout. Spoiler alert, it's not drip-free. I have not yet found a thermos coffee machine that is drip-free, and I think that's ridiculous, but that's just the way it is. So I ordered this, obviously, immediately on Amazon. I got it delivered, and being a technical kind of person, one thing really struck my eye, and it was this little thing here. They had a QR code attached to it. And I'm like, oh, how brilliant. There probably is a user manual attached to that QR code. So what I did is I pointed my cell phone at this thing, took a picture, and got this. Right, so that's not very helpful content. It is still the best coffee machine, but this kind of puts the brand in a different image already. I have two kids. One of them is studying IT, so he said, oh, this is no problem. Give me your phone, Daddy. I will fix this for you. And he said, okay, now it's fixed. So this is fixed content for an IT person. Of course, for me, that was not really good. What I wanted to find out is, how do I actually set the timer? How does this work? So, being very old-fashioned, what I did was I input this enormous long string into Google, and I actually got, believe it or not, a link to a user manual. I'm like, oh, how cool. They actually have their user manual online. That's already, putting the image of the company a little bit better. So I click on this, and I land here. So they have like 300 user manuals on there. I have no idea what the model number of my coffee maker is, so it takes you forever to find this. Then I get this. So I could send this to a high-resolution printer because it has all the crop marks on it and everything, But using this on a smartphone, very difficult. I'm clever, I'm not as clever as my kids, but I'm clever. I said, I know Control F starts a search. So I started a search. I input the word timer. Guess what? It's not in there. So either the PDF is not produced in a way that I can search it, or they are just not describing the timer. And at this point, my kids say, no, Daddy. That's not how you do it nowadays. Let me show you how to figure out how to use the timer. So I used the #1 search engine in the Western world, at least. They used the #2 search engine in the Western world. Any idea what that is? YouTube, exactly. So they went to YouTube and say, oh, look, that looks like your coffee machine. How cool. We clicked on this, and at 2 minutes 23, they actually explain how to use the timer. Big problem for Melitta. This content is not from Melitta. This is user-generated. This is from some dude called Mark, who writes honest reviews, apparently. I don't know. So I mean, he did figure out how to set up the timer, but we're not really sure that's how Melita intended the timer to be used. I mean, a timer is not super sophisticated, but imagine this is a very sophisticated machine and you have some video by some Mark who is honest, like how to wire a complicated machine or something like that. This could be completely wrong, right? I mean, there's no control of this content. It's user generated. And there is actually already a phenomenon out there in the technical world that's called fake documentation, where users generate documentation, but it's actually wrong. And that's a real problem for companies, right? So you need to somehow be able to control that. So these are the changes that are happening. So the content paradigm is changing. I call this the end of predictability. It used to be possible to predict who has contact with what content that you write at what point in the customer journey. This is over, right? I did not go to a Melita store to figure out which coffee machine I want. I just said, okay, Google, tell me which one is the best. And by the way, that content I found was also not from Melita. That was from somebody else. I'm not even sure Melita is the company name. It could be the brand, I don't know. So this is a problem, obviously. Users are changing. We just saw this. Users are active. They're impatient. If you watch my kids figuring out the timer, it's like they do a Google search. No, this is useless, useless, useless. Maybe this. They're just super impatient. They hunt information. They don't read more than 5 words or maybe 7 if they're short ones. Well, German maybe 2. So it's really hard for the content itself is also changing, of course, and we're hearing a lot of that at this conference. It used to be text mainly. Now it's multimedia, it's speech, it's bots, it's all of these things. Many help desks are being replaced by bots. I don't know how often you talk to a bot already. Sometimes you really don't even notice. And I actually heard a funny story in the US. This is becoming a real problem because you have bots that are actually doing sales calls. And somebody got so annoyed they actually produced a bot that you can redirect the other bot to, and it'll engage in a discussion. I don't know if you've tried that. They actually managed to ground servers of people that are doing these annoying bot calls. So, it's really funny. They start arguing and pretty cool. So we're going to see all of that. Of course, it's social, real-time, it's bi-directional. Localization is also changing. I don't know who follows what Taus is writing about, dynamic quality and all of that thing. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. That is changing. And of course, the catalyst for this is also machine translation, right? So people are trying to figure out how can I embed this into a business process. It's very clear that not every content can follow the same process when you want to integrate machine translation into the process. So quality expectations and processes are also simply changing. And AI, we just heard a brilliant presentation on AI, so I'm not really going to get into that. But there's fascinating stuff happening, reaching all the way to content creation. There is AI that can create content. Not only music, but actually text content. So very soon we'll probably have AI creating the content, we'll have AI translating the content, we'll have AI reading the content. So we can finally go play saxophone a little bit more. That'll be fun. A few quotes. I don't know who of you follows the Globally Speaking podcast. That's actually pretty cool. So this was something, I don't know who is a salesperson here. This is not really good news for salespeople, yeah. So marketing is becoming more and more important as opposed to sales, as we can see from this quote here. And marketing has a lot to do with content, right? Content is driving the digital revolution. Content is driving marketing. We actually talk about content marketing nowadays. So this is one of the gurus of content marketing. You can Google him, who says that it's essentially the content that your users take in is actually the ultimate differentiator nowadays. Or a little bit more bluntly, content is what will make your cash register ring. So this is what we're seeing. Another one here, content is the currency of the digital transformation. So these are all cool quotes. I'll fire a few more, right? So everybody's tweeting about this. Everybody's talking about content, blogs, all of that. And this is really, really good news for us. Yeah, because this content has to be correct, it has to be truthful, it has to, people have to believe it when they read it. So in terms of localization, that also means it has to be localized in a good way. Do I have a typo on there? Oh, okay. And what this means is that many companies nowadays are starting to develop a content strategy, right? They're just not in the past. TechDoc used to be post-sales, so that was just a cost factor that was not even considered to be something positive. This is changing because very often consumers go out and want to try to find out something about a product. They Google, they search, and they actually find the documentation and read about a feature there. So that means that what used to be post-sales like localization, that used to also be post-sales very often, is actually becoming more strategic. I'm not going to go into all these points here. You'll have that on your PDF. But content strategies talk about being strategic about content, having smart content. That means content that is tagged with taxonomies, metadata, so you can filter it, so you can do content mashup, all of that. It has to be profiled, purposed, so we have to know what is actually the purpose of this particular content piece. And for instance, for localization, this can be very important because depending on the purpose of that particular piece of content, it could go into a different localization process. So if it's unimportant, why bother putting your best translator onto it? If it's unimportant, do raw MT, or don't localize it at all. Actually, if it's unimportant, but it could be like very short-lived or something like that. So I have a simple concept here of how this can be done. I actually didn't expect you to be able to read it. This beamer is really cool, so you can actually read it probably. But don't worry. What I want to throw out there are a few ideas that maybe is something that you can take up as a localization, and some of you are actually content people, that are very related to what we're doing already, and might be new opportunities. And I've kind of put these into these 4 process steps that are very obvious. So content needs to be created, translated, particularly if you're from our industry. Am I blocking this? Sorry. It has to be managed and it has to be delivered. That's why I call about content delivery as well. And there's part of the title of my presentation is also AI. There is AI in some of these things, not in all of these things. But I think what AI is doing to content is it's changing the way users interact with it. If you think about my funky coffee machine story in the beginning, I asked Google, I found a trustful source, and I just went ahead and purchased it. So that's also where AI is just simply changing the behavior of users, so when they interact with content. So for instance, what you might want to do is you might want to think about, if you're a company producing content, you might want to think about a content strategy. If you're a localization company, you might think about, well, maybe I want to get into helping companies create a content strategy, right? I mean, that's, interestingly, we're all called LSPs, language service providers. A service could be, well, I'm going to help you with your content strategy. That's kind of the purpose of my talk. So here's a short definition of what content strategy actually is. It's about coming up with a useful strategy and a plan for creating, publishing, and governance of useful, usable content. This is also very interesting, yeah. What is useful and usable content? What does that actually mean? So this also gets into a little bit different dynamic quality production, maybe also in the localization, right? So it could be that a certain content is useful, even though it's only automated, fully translated by machines. Might be some glitches in there, but it depends on what the purpose is, and then that can already be useful content if it fulfills the task that it's supposed to fulfill as content. So for instance, one thing we know very well is content internationalized. I find it very difficult nowadays when I get content from US companies now sometimes. So for instance, there used to be an error message in the browser that says error 404, could not find the page or something like that. For a German, that's a very good error message because I know, there must be something wrong with either the page or the server. Chrome now says, oops, something went wrong, or I don't know, something like that. As a German, I almost feel insulted in my intelligence. Like, I don't, what use is that error message to me? I don't even know where to start fixing it. Something went wrong, could be anything. So that's, not really internationalized content because you cannot really take that and translate it because it doesn't get across very nicely. Information is also more and more written in modules. You all know this, we all know this, yeah, because we get these beautiful little tiny snippets from content management systems. Again, this is something where maybe you can wrap a service around that and say, well, if you do want to write in modules, there are certain things you need to take into account. For instance, yes, theoretically, you could chop all your content into 26 modules, the letters of the alphabet, and then assemble pretty much any document in one language. That's going to be really hard to localize into another language, right? And actually, after a while, it's also difficult to use that kind of content in the source language. So there's potential services around there. Profiling, obviously. I'm going to go a little bit faster. And then what the output is from this creation phases. We get granular content. We all know that. We all know what the problem with that is. So we can go tell our clients, hey, you need to watch out for this and that, coherence, reusability, etc. We get profiled content. And again, there we can engage with our customers on a service, on a service level and say, well, what kind of quality profiles do you have? How do you differentiate your content? What purposes does your content have? Can we maybe offer different production processes for your different kinds of content? And if so, how do we know what kind of content you're sending me in a particular batch? And there's some AI that you can put in there, but it could also simply be flagging or tagging or adding taxonomies, metadata, something like that. Like down here, tagged content. The translation phase itself, obviously, I mean, you are all experts, we're all experts. I don't really have to go into much detail here. So, and we just heard Helene's presentation. So routing, sourcing, all of these things are kind of changing. There is the potential that AI or automation will help us there to get rid of this. But I think, again, a company that is not really doing localization, that is focusing maybe on content, they will not know how to implement all this machine translation or automatic sourcing or something like that. So there still will be a service opportunity for us as language service providers, if we want to call ourselves that, to wrap a service around that and help them set that up. Because we know how to do that. We're experts in setting up these processes, so might as well help our clients. And then the output of the translation stage, this is also really interesting because I feel that this is changing. I don't know, maybe somebody will contradict me. But in the past, translation production processes, if you want, they were always following one paradigm. It was this, ISO 17100, every translation runs through this stage and that stage and that stage. And I'm pretty sure that this is currently changing. Taos has a lot of discussions around this. They actually came up with 3 of these. So they have FAUT. Any French speakers here? Yeah. So I really like the abbreviation FAUT, F-A-U-T. What does that mean in French? Error. Yeah. Personally, I think Taos probably did this intentionally because it's just really funny. But it actually stands for fully automated useful translation. That's what FAUT actually means. So it doesn't mean error. But it's kind of funny. And again, the important thing is the useful, right? I mean, there are so many use cases where this fully automated translation actually really is useful. If you go on a travel website and you read reviews, chances are a lot of that content is fully automatically translated. And it's still useful. You still understand, did the people sleep well in that hotel or not? Yeah. Is there a restaurant downstairs or not? If that's the purpose of the content, then this production method can be good enough. Taos does not have this classic in there. I personally think this classic way of producing translations like we have been doing essentially, that will still stay around for a while. I don't think that's going to be replaced very soon. Transcreation, yes. I also think that there's a tendency towards this co-creation, particularly in social media and things like that, in content marketing, blogging, for instance. I see very often that international companies, they don't take a blog that was written in the headquarters and translate it, but it's like all the individual countries write their own blog. Why? Because it's just a lot more relevant locally to create content. So why not? This could perfectly be something we as LSPs can offer, right? I mean, we have networks across the entire world. I'm sure a lot of the translators that are currently translating might just as well be creating content. Maybe they would even prefer to create content rather than having to take the suboptimal quality of the source text and put it in the target language. Maybe they would actually prefer that. So why not think about trying to offer that? The next block, and it's getting towards the end, is this whole management block. And there's a lot of managing going on with content in a company also when you have a content strategy. That again, we really know how to do a lot of this stuff, right? I mean, translation memory, CMSs, probably a lot of you come into contact with CMSs and know and can help the client set that up a little bit. Terminology management, which by the way is the exact opposite of SEO, search engine optimization, but it's pretty much done in a very similar way. It's just that the purpose is exactly the other way around. Quality management, all of these are things that we know how to do as LSPs. So again, why not wrap this into a service? You could say, okay, instead of translating, what I'm going to focus on is quality management. There are actually agencies out there that do that offer only quality management to their clients, and they don't even translate anymore. So a lot about managing. And then delivery. This is a little bit in evolution still, so this is not quite as established yet as all the other ones. Of course, you have to talk about multi-channel. YouTube is getting more and more important, so it's not only text, it's also video, audio, etc. As Helene also said, this is coming probably as the next phase, but currently this is still quite avant-garde for most customers to actually produce videos and stuff like that. Data security is an issue, particularly in Europe. In the US, a little bit less. But data security, for instance, also has to do with making sure that your content is current, that you actually remove old content, and that can be quite challenging, actually, to make Google remove old content from their indexing engines. So that's also interesting. Personalization, interactivity, feedback. And then this is also interesting, and of course that goes into AI very strongly, because we can nowadays analyze the consumption of content after the delivery and see, for instance, how many users stayed on this page for how long, or how many users clicked on, yes, this was helpful, and then we can take that and optimize the entire process. And I think, again, here, we have knowledge for some of these things. As Helene said, trying to start to measure everything. There are companies out there that do things like A/B testing and measuring, how deep should I localize? Does that have any impact on how many people then book this room or not? So there are experiments like that, localization depth, things like that. So this is also interesting. And it basically, rather than being a process in one direction that I had in the beginning when I showed you this very simple basic concept, it's actually a loop. So it actually turns round and round. And the important thing, I think, where we can also really help clients, because there is not much out there yet about this, is taking the result that we measure and that we analyze, and putting it back to the beginning, and trying to optimize content creation. You can do things like, well, a lot of people left the website when they came to this particular page, so maybe it's not relevant in my target language, maybe it was poorly localized. We can experiment, we can try that. As a very good example, we sometimes have customers that say, oh, we have a new website, it's this URL, please localize it. And we say, okay, well, maybe you could send us the content. Oh yeah, here it is. And then you get this enormous XML file. And they spent 3 years producing the website, and now you have 2 weeks to localize it. Has ever happened to anybody? No. Okay, well, we have bad luck with our clients then, I guess. So, but one thing you could do is you could say, well, do you have analytics of your source website? Which are the top 30 pages? Let's take these top 30 pages, let's do a really good job, and the bottom, 200 pages, let's just machine translate them for now. Maybe we'll come back to them later, because then we can put an analytics in place and actually track how the target languages are working on the website, and maybe improve them there, do A/B testing. So there's a lot you can do here in managing that. Maybe you should do some social media generation for them so that more people go on the website. I don't know, things like that. I call that service. As in LSP, so there's a chance for us to actually become language service providers rather than, turn words into different language producers or something like that. So that brings me to my end. As I said, I already gave you the takeaway in the beginning, because I think that then sometimes it gets across a little better. So content and the users and localization are changing. As Helene said, yes, some of the things we currently do might get redundant. Maybe that's even a good thing. Who knows? But the fact that content is getting strategic for a lot of companies opens a lot of new opportunities, particularly because we are really in a very good situation to open up and offer adjacent services. We have a global network of talent. People are really good. We've pampered them for the last 20 years, so they enjoy working with us. We have a lot of high-tech know-how of how to process language and do stuff with content that companies can really use. So I think, let's get ready for that and see what we can offer in the future of content in the age of AI. Thanks for your patience.
All right. So well done, Klaus. Wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. So
Thank you for curating.
my pleasure. It is a lot of fun to be on the program committee. It's some work, but it's you get a sneak preview at these presentations. And then you see them again, and then when you finally see them live, and this is the last one I'm coaching today, so I'm going out with a bang. But then you see it live, and it's just so different, and it's wonderful to see it all come together in the room with the energy of the audience. So, and I'm feeling it. There's a lot of questions here, but although I've seen this now twice in the earlier stages, and I've seen it now, I do have a question. Does LSP then mean in 5 years not language service provider, but language solution provider? Is that where we're going? Will LSPs own content, create content? Will they provide an international solution to the content problem to clients? Is this what you see?
I think it's one way to go. Yeah, so I think, like Helene just said in the previous presentation, we need to be willing to embrace change. The content landscape is changing. Companies are struggling with that. So I think that's definitely one way you can go as an LSP to actually provide. I'm not very happy with the word language, actually. I think maybe we should change the word language, but I don't know what else L could stand for that makes sense. So localization, solution, I don't know, something like that. But yeah, definitely I think we can put a lot more service into this, which will also help us get over this commodity problem that we've had. So will it change things? Yes. For instance, I'm personally quite convinced that paying by the word in content marketing and stuff like that, that's not a future, right? That just simply will not work. So we need new business concepts and new business models. But I think this is a tremendous opportunity. Companies are realizing just how important content is, and that they actually need to control it. Just one opportunity, though.
Mm-hmm. Okay, more questions? Come on, people. Don't let me down now. We're almost there. There must be more questions. Did you answer everything? It was such an all-encompassing presentation. So, Katharina. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Klaus, for the presentation. I was wondering, because you mentioned that a lot of customers are noticing that content is getting more and more strategic for them. What I actually noticed talking to people in Berlin, that there are a lot of companies that are in digital transformation processes, and I have the feeling they're kind of jumping into that, and they actually don't know about the complexity. So could you tell us a bit more about the clients with whom you already experienced that, and with whom you already went on that journey?
Yeah, I don't know if this one works. Yeah, this one. I'll take this one, then you don't have to run around. So this is a very interesting question, actually, because in the past, I think only like the high-tech companies were dealing with this kind of things. And our main client base is actually, hardcore machine engineering kind of companies. And they are also now getting into this as well. So what you can see very often is that you look at this and you say, oh yeah, but a coffee machine, that's business to consumer thing. This is not business to business. But no, business to business is following business to consumer. So what used to be B2C 5 years ago, that is now mainstream B2B, because the purchasing officers are also getting younger and things like that. So we can see this happening in industries where, I don't know, we have one client that is in welding. You're like, what are you going to tweet about welding? But no, they have a whole team that does social media for welding machines. So that is definitely happening. So they're realizing that too.
Okay, any other questions, thoughts, comments? I think everybody's going to take this home and mull it over. Yep. Okay, so thank you all. Please be sure that you had signed into the session so that we get a head count and can gauge the interest level, and also so that you are able to give feedback. But I can say I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.